All right, then. So I think we're going to go ahead and get started. So my name is Quentin Russell. I am the engagement specialist here at Doc365. And for those who don't know, here at Doc365, we tend to do a webinar, usually about once every week to every other week. During these webinars, we essentially we cover different topics and explore how Office 365 and SharePoint can help businesses grow and expand, and basically just our goal is to help you get the most out of your Office 365 environment. And so to that end, we just want to make sure that we're providing a good quality education and showing you how you can, again, just take advantage of Office 365, especially because I know that a lot of the higher end features, a lot of the top end stuff, that a lot of the, things like metadata, what each different site means, a lot of that can be not confusing, but somewhat obtuse. So to that end, that's why we're doing these webinars. Today, we'll be taking a look at how Office 365 can help you guys track important contract data. So what you can do with that in order to basically make sure that you're staying compliant and you're on top of all of the agreements that your company has entered into. With that said, let's jump into it and take a look at what we're going to be talking about today. So first of all, we're going to do a brief introduction. So who we are, why you should care about what we're talking about, kind of establishing that we do actually know what we're talking about. One second. And then we'll take a look at what contract data you should be tracking. So basically, it's important to know that you should be tracking contract data, but making sure that you're getting the right kinds, making sure that you're not wasting your time in any areas, that can be super important to, ensuring compliance and staying on top of your contracts. After that, we'll take a look at the Office 365 features that actually help you track said data. So basically, kind of giving you a primer to understand what we're going to be talking about in the last bit, which is actually using Office 365 to track that contract data, so using the different features available to help you basically keep on top of everything, kind of like I've been saying. After that, we'll do a question and answer session where I'll go through and answer any questions you might have throughout the webinar. So the way we'll handle that is that if you will ask the questions in the chat as you have them, when we come to that question and answer session, I will go into the chat, go through any questions, try to answer those to the best of my ability. If there's anything I cannot answer at this time, I will make sure to include that as part of the webinar recording email that will be going out later today. With that said, let's jump into the webinar. So first of all, who are we? So we're Doc365. We're a company located in Jacksonville, and we have over 18 years of experience working with Microsoft to basically deliver an exceptional array of productivity solutions. So we've worked with a wide range of companies in a variety of different industries, including King's Hawaiian. We do work with multiple YMCAs, United Ways, and we work with all of them to implement a diverse array of SharePoint productivity tools. So these include intranet portals, contract management systems, CRM solutions, and more. If you're interested in any of those, feel free to reach out to us for a free demo. It's about 30 to 45 minutes, no obligation. We'll take a look at the solution, see if it can maybe help you. If you're interested, you can head on over to our website, mydoc365.com. Go to the top right corner. There you'll see a button for free demo. Fill out that information and we'll get back to you within about an hour or so. So that said, on to the actual topic at hand. What contract data you should be tracking. So there's a lot of data that you can be gathering about your contracts. An almost absurd amount because I mean, everything that you store associated with a contract is technically data. But in terms of the actual metrics that you should be paying attention to, there's broadly about 5 different categories that you want to be focusing on. So the first one is the number and type of contracts. The second is the actual dollar value. So any of the metrics associated with that. After that, you want to take a look at important dates, obligations and deliverables, and then your contract relationships. So we'll delve a little more into each one of these right now. So when it comes to the number and types of contracts, basically that's kind of a broad term, but basically you want to be gathering this basic kind of common sense information. So this includes like the total number of contracts that you're working on, the total number of contracts by department, number of contracts by type. So are you entered into non-disclosure agreements? What are your statements of work? Are they vendor contracts? Are they customer contracts? Are they coming in on your paper, or are they being sent to you on third-party paper? How many contracts are you entering in by month, by quarter, by year? All of these are important answers that you need to be able to answer. For a lot of companies, their contract data attitude, that's a bad way of phrasing that, but essentially their attitude towards collecting basic information like this has kind of just been to ballpark it. They wave their hands and say, well, that's not really the data we're focused on. We're kind of more focused on actually, you know, doing the actual business portion of what we're doing. And that's an attitude of failure. That is going to bite you in the butt every single time. If you are not tracking even this most basic data, you're setting yourself up to fail in the long run. You open yourself up to major risks, such as losing contracts. You know, that's a major compliance and security issue. But not only is it just a major compliance issue, that also opens you up to missing out on deliverables and the obligations that you need to deliver as part of that contract. You do that, you open yourself up to lawsuits, fines, fees. All of these can have a negative monetary impact on your organization. Basically, if you're tracking this, even this most basic data, it's a really good baseline for determining the overall health of your contract management process. Because if you have a standing number that says we have X number of contracts, and then you go do an audit maybe once a quarter and you say, oh, actually, we don't have that many contracts, we can't find them. Either that's a sign that you need to go through and find those contracts, which can be helpful, or it's a sign that you're not doing a good enough job of accurately entering the number of contracts into the system, whether you go over or under. Either way, it's just a really good baseline indicator for the health of your process. This also goes to just being able to make informed business decisions. So what are the most active parts of your company? Who is doing what? What is going on? What agreements have you entered into? All of these are highly important, because if your company is entering into quite a number of NDAs and then some new person comes to your marketing department and says, hey, we would like to say that we work with this company. They go make a bunch of advertisements, roll out some big banner stuff, throw up some Google ads, whatever in the hell they do. Either way, they do all that stuff, and then you get a fun email from that company saying, hey, we did not give you permission to use our likeness, to use our name in your advertising. Take these down and we'll sue. Well, first of all, that sours your relationship with that company. Second of all, that sours sours your overall reputation. And also, if you don't take them down in a timely manner, that's a lawsuit right there. All of that stems from just being able to keep track of the number and types of contracts in your system. But moving on from that, we'll touch on dollar value. This is arguably one of the most important metrics or metric categories, but you know, what's the total dollar amount of your contracts? What is the total value of contracts by department? What are the costs associated with your contracts? What is the overall revenue of the contracts in your system? All of this is important information that you need to be tracking, because you need to be able to have a thorough understanding of your business. And in order to do so, and in order to be able to make these informed decisions, you need to be knowing where the money is. I mean, basically having this data and saying, well, so we have, for instance, say, well, the thing is that a lot of this also depends on what your organization is doing. I really should have prefaced this by saying that Number and type of contracts, that's universal. But in terms of dollar value, it really depends on the organization, because a lot of companies maybe only have a couple contracts per year. Or, you know, the contracts that they do have are more just vendor contracts where they're sourcing out from a supplier and they're having to manage the costs associated with that. But that's still a dollar value contract that they need to be keeping track of. And that's a figure they need to be on top of. Because by tracking the overall dollar value and getting that breakdown by department, by, you know, month, by year, that's by quarter, that sort of thing, you're able to see what's working, what isn't working, where your costs are, and you can potentially come in and take a look at that and say, well, this isn't working, we can cut this. And ultimately, you might end up in a situation where you see something is actually doing really well. You didn't anticipate it doing really well, but you take a look at the contracts, you take a look at the dollar value. Say it's, for instance, it's like with sales contracts. If, for instance, your company sells multiple products, you take a look at that and you think to yourself, okay, well, we're making a ton of sales on this low value item, and we're only making a few sales of this high value item. But you go to take a look at the value of all the contracts, you do the breakdown by item, and you say, okay, well, actually these contracts, these smaller items, the total value is actually less than these bigger items. Maybe we should stop focusing on these smaller items, because even though they're easier to sell, they don't have as high of a revenue, and we can double down on this larger item, potentially sell more of it, and make up the losses for what we would have had if we had sold more of the smaller item. Basically, it just gives you another vantage point for you to be able to say, hey, what's working, what isn't, because there's a lot of places you can get that, because, you know, you have your total, back to that sales example, yes, you're tracking the sales numbers, you're tracking, like, you know, who's making the sales, when they're making the sales, but you know, if you're just looking at it that way, then you'll just see, well, the smaller item sells more, so we should actually double down on the larger item. So it doesn't replace that viewpoint, it doesn't replace that idea, but it does give you another perspective that you can use to make more informed business decisions. Moving on from that, important dates in a contract's life cycle. I mean, this is arguably the second most important metric category, but this includes things like expiration dates, renewal dates, when, like, the time period you have to cancel a contract, any review periods that you need to enter in, other important dates in a contract's life cycle. This is where you need to be the most on top of your contract lifecycle process. Yes, dollar value is important for the overall health of your business, but for the overall safety and compliance of your business, this is where you need to be on top of things. Especially because this also does contribute to costs. Say, for instance, you enter into a contract with a vendor, and hidden somewhere in that contract within, like, the expiration date is a clause that says, hey, on this date, you have between, you know, you have 30 days out from the contract's expiration to cancel it, otherwise it auto renews. Which is increasingly starting to become a thing, especially with companies like, say, Adobe, wherein if you don't cancel within that cancellation period, you actually have to pay a hefty cancellation fee, and in some cases you actually have to pay out the rest of the contract in one sitting. And if you miss that cancellation window and you don't want to pay that money in all in one sitting, then you're stuck paying, you know, another year, another 2 years for a product or service you're not necessarily using. So keeping up to date with all of these dates allows you to stay on top of things, make sure you're not wasting money, and ensures that you're able to give the contracts due diligence and due thought. Because if you're coming up on a contract expiration date, you come in and look and it's a week away. A week is not a long time. It's actually quite a short amount of time to have a discussion like that, especially if it's a large scale contract. But if you give yourself 30 days out, 90 days out, 60 days out, These can help you stay on top of that because you can have these discussions. You don't have to rush them. You can take the time to do the research and potentially find alternatives if you would like to move away from a vendor that you're working with. From here, you want to be tracking the next set of metric categories, essentially, is the obligations and deliverables. So these include things like payments, project milestones, tasks that need to be completed, any documents that need to be sent over to the other party. So for instance, if you're working with another company and they require a certificate of insurance from you, they require you fill out a due diligence form. If you have specific dates in the contract for when a payment is due, these sorts of things are important to keep up with. These do kind of overlap with the project, with the important dates within a contract. But these are more the actual tasks that people are doing, things that need to get done, and how people are able to track these and assign them out to themselves. It's important to be tracking this, staying on top of this, and ensuring that people are getting done what they have been assigned to do. Otherwise, you run into a situation where people are confused and you run up on an important date, something's due within the next day. No one's worked on it because no one was sure who was supposed to be working on it and when it was supposed to be done by. Basically, when it comes to this, it's basically just the overall organization and how well your people are staying on top of the actual management of the contract management process. But moving on from this to contract relationships. So basically you need to be keeping track of things like associated contracts. So parent contracts, child contracts, any renewals that you have in the system, basically seeing how things are interconnected. So for instance, a lot of times, like if you're making a sale with someone, you might have your statement of work, you might have your non-disclosure agreement, and then you title up with your master services agreement. Well, that's 3 contracts in a system. And if you're not making sure to associate those with one another and putting some way to show that they're linked, well, you run into a situation where people are unsure of what needs to happen. If there's something in one contract that's predicated on another, you won't be able to easily track down that information. You might run the risk of being non-compliant with, say, one aspect of one of the contracts. And it's a whole cluster and it's a mess. And you really want to avoid doing that. That's why it's important to track these kinds of metrics. So moving on from that, what features in Office 365 actually help you track data? Well, there's about 2 big ones that help with this, specifically what we're going to be using to help with contract management. So the first one is a SharePoint list, which is basically just for those who don't know, but a SharePoint list is basically just a collection of data similar to an Excel spreadsheet. It basically contains rows and columns, and basically the rows contain data, and then the columns actually contain the metadata. So, that's a big word that gets thrown around a lot, but what does that mean? Well, metadata is essentially additional information about your files and documents. So this includes things like author, file name, creation date, content type, file size, and more. So this and SharePoint lists are the primary features that we're going to be using to collect and track the metrics that we discussed earlier in this webinar. So how do we actually do that? So let me jump over to a new screen. So basically what I've done is I've built out like a small SharePoint site here. So what this does, and on the site, I've built out like a series of lists and different document libraries. What we're going to come here is we're going to create a new list. So the list is what we're going to primarily be using to track all of this. Now, when you go to create a new list, you can actually, as you can see right here, there are several templates that you can use, and there are multiple templates existing elsewhere outside of the basic 8 right here that you can access and download. But for this purposes, we're just going to start from scratch. We're not really going to be doing anything fancy. So we're just going to do contract management. So we'll create this list. So here's what we're going to want to do. First of all, we're going to want to add new metadata columns. So the way we're going to want to do that is we're going to come under here and we're going to go to site contents. Oh, nope. wrong one. Site info. No, I do apologize. Let me get back to that list. Well, there's multiple ways to do it, but another way to do it is just come right here and add the metadata manually. So in this case, we're going to go with, so we come right here and click more. Yep, there we go. So we'll go to create a new metadata column. In this case, we'll say, party type, contract type. So in this case, we'll offer a choice. So users will have a choice of different things to basically that they can use. So in this case, we'll go with a customer, vendor, and we'll go with a with other, just in case there's a extra organization that you're doing. So from there, you would choose the metadata that you would like to have right here. But in this case, we'll just click OK. So as you can see right here, we add a new thing to the list. 1 second. So we'll add a new, so we'll say right here, it's a NDA, add an attachment right here. We'll just go with a, one second. Oh, one sec, I do apologize. It's not letting me. Huh. Okay. Well, show must go on. Anyway, so what we'll do is we'll add more columns, I guess. So in this case, we'll want to build out the different, basically, we'll want to build out a series of different metadata columns. From here, we'll basically build it out to include things like contract, like I said, contract type, dollar value, who's the owner of the contract, basic things like that that allow you to sort and organize the metadata. So if we come back to this other list right here, so we go back to, like, say, if we go to the parties list real quick. So for instance, with this, we have this built out, we have the metadata. So we have things like, so if we're organizing like the parties and organizations that we're working with. So basically we have this listed out right here. So we have the company, we have where we can find their information. You can include hyperlinks out to that. So basically what you would do is you would build this out so that it says, so that people can jump to the specific document, as opposed to having to, basically just have it be like an Excel spreadsheet. Then you would choose things like party type, so who they are, what they do, and then who is responsible for managing the contract. You would then add other data on top of that. And then you would just add to this slowly over time. And from there, you would build out this whole list. And then what you would do is you would use SharePoint views to basically filter out the information. So for instance, if you want to create a new view, have it be for, 1 second, I want to see everything by Skynet. So we create this view. And then what we do is we edit the current view. And for this, we want to see only the things created by. So first of all, we want to filter out, show only items where, when the party, 1 second, contract manager created by ID, when the title is equal to Skynet. So we okay this. And from there, it just shows everything for Skynet. And what you would do is you would choose between the different, basically what you would do is, like I said, you would build out the different metadata columns. So for instance, if we want to also include something like right here, currency, dollar amount, currency format, save. Then what we do is we would come right here, we would edit this, and we would say the dollar amount is 1,500. And in this case, we'll edit this one and say that the dollar amount is 5,000. So we've added this information, and we can also add others. So for instance, say you want to add something like when a, let's go date and time, contract expiration date. So we'll add this information, add an expiration date in here. So we'll say the expiration date is the 27th, save that information, add that in here. Expiration date is the 30th. Then what we can do, which going back to the views real quick, we'll go here and we'll say we want to create a new view. Oh, nope. Under $2,000 contracts or parties. So we'll create that. At the current view. Basically, when you're creating a view, it's allowing you to dictate what shows up and when. And it allows you to save these filters for later use, as opposed to having to refilter out the information every time. So this is a great tool that can help you figure out how, so once you've established the metadata, you've started storing your contracts within the list and organizing them using a SharePoint list, what you'll then do is you'll create a series of different views to find the information that you want. This allows you to essentially create those different types of dashboards almost. That allows you to easily get to that information without having to jump around and having to dig through a whole, without having to dig through a whole series of different, you know, just having to scroll all the way down and hope that you get the right contract and find the right information. From here, you can do a series of other different things. For one, you can always begin to integrate Power Automate, which is a default Office 365 integration. So you can set things like reminders. So for instance, like with expiration date, it has some intuitive things so that once the expiration date comes, you can then use this to set up a reminder email to come in to you that says, hey, we would like to, you know, email me when the contract is 30 to 60 days from expiring, which can help you automate a lot of that and make sure that so that instead of having to come in and manually review this, you're just coming in and yeah, you know, it's passively letting you know without you having to actively always come in here and set everything up. But then you can also create a series of different custom rules. So you can have things like, well, if a dollar amount for a contract is greater than this, email this person in the organization so that they can make sure to track that. If a dollar amount is equal to this, create a task for this person that tells them to do this, all of that fun stuff. A lot of that, however, is a lot of Power Automate stuff. And Power Automate is its own fun beast. We do have a webinar that goes over how to use Power Automate. So if you're interested in checking that out, going over to our website, mydoc365.com/webinars. If you scroll down, it should be under our SharePoint Basics series. There we cover workflows, how to build them, and we go more in depth on that. I can also include that as part of the link to the recording for this webinar. Now, the thing is that there are some limitations to this. First of all, it's the biggest limitation is how much time do you have? Setting all of this up can be arduous because once you've set up the list, once you set up the list, from there, it just kind of, it grows, it evolves, it expands, and, you know, sure, it's great when you only have like 20 to 30 contracts, but, you know, once you reach, you know, that 100+ mark, as you've been in operation for longer and longer, it generally tends to get harder and harder to keep on top of everything. Not only that, but with the extensive amount of contract data you're trying to collect, as you can see, the metadata columns are just going to go on for forever. So it's going to run into a situation where people just aren't going to want to go in there because it's not pretty to look at. And it's not very intuitive because you're having to scroll all the way over, find what you're looking for, and then from there you can like filter out that information. But still, it's not a lot of people are going to think to do that. The other thing is that there's still a lot of just manual aspects of this process. Like you're still having to set everything up, but it's difficult to segment things out. You're also not really going to be able to use this to build things out like obligations, specific notifications for people, because at the end of the day, it's just a list and that's all you're using for it. Now, there are other ways to get around this. However, that kind of gets into that kind of gets into custom development territory. You're getting out of like SharePoint out of the box stuff, which I do have an example of that. So basically, if you have the time, if you have the wherewithal to do so, to put the time in to become like the ultimate SharePoint power user, well, eventually you might be able to build out something like this. But at that point in time, you're putting in tens of thousands of dollars and, you know, having to, and putting in hundreds of hours of man hours to get this going. And at the end of the day, you're probably going to get something that looks kind of like this, where as opposed to, so you have like all of the contracts stored here in the list with the different metadata, but instead of having just the document be listed, it actually jumps you out to a full little container for that contract, where instead of having to manage everything as part of one metadata list, it then takes you to this listing right here, wherein then you can see the different documents associated with it. So instead of just storing the contract, it can be any request documents, any other forms of documentation. You can list out the workflows and obligations right here, as opposed to having to create a custom task for someone, say like in Planner, and then having to assign that out and trying to keep everything linked. Instead, it's all right here. Here you can also see those associated contracts. That's not exactly something you can set up with a SharePoint list. And if you are doing it with just that default out of the box option, it's going to be cluttered and messy. So instead of having it with this tab-based approach, which isn't something that you can actually fully do out of the box, what we're seeing right here is basically our contract management system that we build out on our client's Office 365 environment. So as opposed to our clients having to do it themselves, what we do is we come in, we build out a site, we build out a full contract management site for them. We deploy this template to there. We help them configure it. So basically, like with the metadata and everything, you can get, we provide tools for making it so that you can use all of that metadata and use the lists, but you have the back end right here where the list is ugly, not great, not easy to use, and then you come right here and it looks better, it's easier to search, you have access to the filters right here, and you can save the views like I showed you previously here, and it doesn't blend in. It's going to be easier for people to use it. And then, like I said, you're basically building out the different obligations, the notifications, and you're able to keep track of all of that. And then from there, like our system helps you with a bunch of default types of reports. So for instance, you can create a custom report right here, or you can see things like contracts by department, by cost. You can see things like when a contract is going to expire. The system also sends you notifications based on that. But as you can see, you can then filter that out and find all of the contracts that are going to expire within a certain period without having to go through, construct a new view, do a full filter, and it helps you really save time. Here you can see the full listing of tasks that people are doing. So instead of having to go directly into a contract or go into a contract listing, you can instead come in here and say, well, I would like to find all the tasks assigned to this person. I would like to find all the tasks associated with this contract or this company. And then you can do the same thing for the different parties that you're working with. So instead of just having contracts be stored, you can also have a repository for all of the contracts in your organization, all of the parties you're working with, and then from there, have them be associated with one another so that you can access that information and seamlessly jump from contract to party and back and forth and to wherever you need to be to access the metrics that you need to be tracking. You can do all of that within our contract management system. And that's just kind of the tip of the dash. That's the tip of the dashboard. That's the tip of the iceberg. Like, we also have these custom dashboards right here that not only take the metrics that you're tracking and present them to you, but they also give you a visual representation so that you can better visualize what's going on with your contracts in your head. Same thing goes with the requests that are going through your system. Basically, this is something that comes as part of the contract intake process. That's something that we can discuss if you were interested in setting up a free demo with us. With that said, we're gonna jump back over here. I do think that's pretty much everything. If you're interested in taking a look at the contract management system that I showed you, and you're interested in potentially exploring how you can get your company access to the higher level SharePoint and Office 365 functions to use for tracking your contract metrics, feel free to sign up for a free demo with us. Like I said, it's a 30 to 45-minute process. We explore your organization, we take a look at your process, and we see how our system might be able to help you. So if that's of interest to you, feel free to reach out to us. You can contact us at 904-309-9970, or, I do apologize, or you can reach out to us at info@mydoc365.com. If you're interested in what we do and the work that we are doing, feel free to follow us on LinkedIn at doc365.com. That's been everything. I have been Quentin Russell. Thank you very much, and have a great day.